everybody. You are listening to I'm Over It. My name is Atlanta DeCadernet Taylor, and this is my podcast.
Hi, everybody. I am here with Aliza Kelly, who is a host, an author, and astrologer. You have written 2 books. You have also a podcast called Stars Like Us that I read has been featured on Bustle and Newsweek as being one of the best astrology podcasts to listen to. And you write a column in Cosmo, online and in print, right?
This is true.
This is a lot.
I'm a Capricorn rising. I can't do it any other way.
Now, does that mean that you are good at following through with things? Does it mean you take, like, I'm really good at starting projects and I have to really work hard at sticking with them, like, are you just like, what does that mean? I'm a Capricorn rising.
I would say that you probably have Gemini somewhere in your chart based on that. But I have my Capricorn rising works very harmoniously with like my Virgo Mercury and my Virgo Mars. So no, I don't, if I start a project, I will drill it until it is dead and it can no longer has life anymore. I am an obsessive workaholic. I am so committed to like every single thing I do, which sucks because not everything I start is actually a good idea. So, but then because I'm so like, I become so dedicated and so passionate about them, I have to like see them to fruition, even though they probably should have just like never been ideas in the first place.
I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure that I'm sure that's not all true. So how did you get into astrology?
So, it's interesting because I just finished my manuscript for my 3rd book and I'm really excited about it. It will be coming out in 2021, which I'm assuming is going to be a very different looking world than the one we're in today. At least I hope it is. But in this book, which is called Own Your Destiny, I went through, I sort of tried to answer like, how did I get into astrology? So I went through the process of going through like the archives of social media. Like we're talking like live journal archives. Like I went so deep into my psyche of trying to figure out like, how did this start? And it turns out the writing has been on the fucking wall for like my entire life. I would like muse about like, I hate Virgo boys, like when I was like 13 years old. But in my sort of conscious adult mind, I thought that it was a total shock for me to become an astrologer. It was not at all what I had been planning for. It wasn't what I went to school for. Obviously, like it was not my trajectory as I had imagined it to be. But I started working in the astrology space in 2013. 2014, I opened an astrology dating app called Align. And it was then that I started to sort of like really get involved in what the business of astrology was. But it was still a few years after that I then, after my company closed in 2016, that I then introduced myself as sort of an astrologer. In that time that I was even working with astrology in the app, I was still reticent to identify myself as being an astrologer because I still was worried about being stigmatized by that title.
Right.
And then of course I also didn't know enough then, so I also had to like learn more to really become one.
A full-time astrologer.
Yeah.
You had to have a side hustle until you got your big role as a full-time astrologer.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, because I'm like, how do you even start that? Because I would imagine there's got to be just something inside of you, right? Like are you like a seeker or something? Because I know for me, like, I'm not an astrologer, but I believe in energies. I believe in like, I'm super sensitive to a lot of stuff. I totally believe in like spirits and all of that stuff. I love astrology. But that's something that I just feel like has always been there, like just as a kid, even like I was always like making fairy gardens and like was just, very imaginative and mythical and like I always loved just things outside of
I love
our
it.
world. You know what I mean? Like outside of the physical world. But that was just like always there. So do you feel like, you always just had this, like, was it always just astrology, or was it this thing of like, I just am interested in things outside of myself, outside of the universe, or like?
Yeah, I've always been interested in, like, I was that kid. I don't know if you can, we're doing a Zoom video. I have a Ouija board up there.
Feel that.
So
Yeah.
like, I was always that kid who was, ready to get weird at the sleepover. I wanted to play light as a feather, stiff as a board. I wanted to do seances. I wanted all the ghosts in the party nonstop.
Yes.
I was always definitely like the spookiest kid, for sure. I get dressed up as a goth girl like 6 years in a row for Halloween, starting at the age of 5. Like, it was always something that, I think that, Beetlejuice was my favorite movie.
Bewitched.
I love the spooky, occulty ghost thing. But I actually was then into my teenage years, like, super punk. Like, I then parlayed that into being like a real punk kid, and all of the new age stuff felt like it was like it was not in the same space. So I was not interested in like crystals or energy work or things that felt too like your kooky Santa Fe aunt, giving you like something charged. I wanted
Yeah.
things it was like spooky or bust. But so when I first was in my early 20s, having outgrown now my punk phase and having like started my professional life within the art world, I was quite shocked to see myself so interested in astrology, because to me it had sort of, at some point it sort of got lumped into like that new age goop kind of
For
world.
sure. Yeah.
And it didn't feel very punk to me.
Mhm.
But I guess my entry point into it in my early 20s was actually realizing that it sort of was neither new age nor was it punk, but it was actually just like a really amazing language of understanding oneself.
Yeah.
Um, and it was at that same time that I started doing a lot of, I started working with a therapist. I started doing a lot of like internal understanding, and a lot of the things that did not make sense to me, when I imposed the astrology language, like just clicked instantly. So it was this, I found that it, rather than it being sort of having like a lifestyle component, it was just an incredible language to create compassion for myself.
Wow. That's really cool. I feel that, because even, I mean, well, my experience, like, obviously there's even, I mean, I grew up, again, like my mom was pretty hippie, like it was pre-goop, so there was no like connection between crystals and goop and like, moms and Lululemon pants and stuff like that. It was like really like Topanga Canyon, and like it was, the real deal. It wasn't like it is now. You weren't buying crystals for like $80 and putting them up your vagina. And I've always like believed in that we were always spiritual. And I don't, now even people will be like, oh, astrology, and for me, I'm always like, well, it just helped me. I just connect to it because I find, first of all, some of it I find to be very true, but it also is just like, I just find it fun because, there's a lot of things in there that do make things make sense, if you will, or that I just like connect to for one reason or another. I mean, am I like a hardcore, plan my life around astrology? No, but there have been times in my life where I felt very lost and felt like I needed to connect to something as well. And I felt like I veered towards that. And like, I was totally the person who'd be like on a date and be like, what's your sign? And then like, the classic girl who's like, what's your birth? What time are you born? Like, we're going to do your chart. I mean, like, sorry, I can't date any more Scorpios,
which might be fair.
I mean, Dave, my fiance, is a Gemini, which my dad is also a Gemini, which was, whatever. But I actually didn't do his chart for like 2 years because I was like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. So, I mean, I also read on your podcast though, as well, it's not only astrology, it says magic.
Yes.
So what other kind of, things in the...
Well, I think I'm going to have to soon. Well, I don't know if I'm going to have to soon do a full
rebrand.
There's a siren going on, so I don't know.
Oh.
Maybe we want to pass.
You're in New York.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's edgy background noise. I don't think I'm going to have to do a whole rebrand, but I think I'm going to have to qualify what I mean a little bit more, because I feel like, yes, it ultimately it is magic, and it's magic with a K, which means like manifesting magic, as opposed to stage magic, which is like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. I'm not a I'm not a magician a la Magic Castle of Los Angeles, even though I still have never been, and I would really appreciate an invitation at some point down the line.
For sure.
But the magic that I do is very much built on manifestation and intention setting, and there's just a lot of different ways that can be, that people identify that. It can be considered like, it's any sort of like positive affirmation type of thinking of but I have certain practices and techniques that I have developed from years and years and years of studying different types of schools of thought in magic and manifestation, but most of those are embedded in sort of the ceremonial magic tradition, which is very occulty and esoteric. Mm-hmm. So like there's different ways to ultimately arrive at the same thing. Some ways of arriving at wanting to manifest more things in your life are almost clinical. It doesn't have any, we don't really need to talk about energy or ritual practices, but the way that I have found my pathway into doing that has been through sort of a blend of looking at different like witchcraft practices and spiritualist practices, and sort of creating my own secret sauce on them.
Yeah. And you said therapy as well.
And therapy, a lot of fucking
it's not
therapy.
So it's not just like you're pulling everything out of your astrology hat, right? Like, as you're saying, there's a combination of all of these kinds of things. So what about when you're going to do you got to write your horoscopes for the month for Cosmo? How do you even start doing that?
Well, horoscopes are a real bitch. Horoscopes
really?
There are some astrologers who are just phenomenal horoscope writers. I have come to realize that I am a very slow writer, and I think that I'm a very good writer, but I am not a fast writer. It takes me a long time to put sentences together in a way that I feel like is articulate and poetic, and it's just the quality writing I like. But there's 12 different zodiac signs, and that means, but you're looking at the same exact planets for each of the different zodiac signs. So basically you need to come up with 12 completely original interpretations of the same thing over and over again. And it's really, it's like a marathon. It's really exhausting. So I always start last minute. I always end up pissing off my boyfriend because I have to inadvertently cancel something we had planned. I always end up crying. And I've been doing this for like 5 years and I've never learned my lesson. So there's a reason that Susan Miller's horoscopes are always late. Horoscopes will never ever be, you never learn how to do horoscopes properly. It's like you either
long.
Yes, it's just an exhausting experience.
Do you have to do you ever I'm thinking of like a better word of like interning with a fellow astrologist? Do you have like a mentor?
I do. I have I work with different teachers I started working with Annabelle Gatt when I first started working in astrology. So we've been working together for like 7 years. And she is my mentor. And then I started working one-on-one with Anne Ortley maybe 3 years ago. So I do a lot of learning. I'm always learning and I'm always studying. But unfortunately, when it comes to horoscopes, these cannot be outsourced. They have to come from my brain. They have to be my writing. And I think it's a very important part of being an astrologer. But it's definitely not my favorite part of being an astrologer.
What is your favorite part?
I would say like interpretation, like macro interpretation, thinking about what the planets mean on the large scale, how they influence like different generations and different phases of life on the collective level. And then, working with clients one-on-one as well is something interesting because you can see that micro and the macro. But I think that my favorite is really thinking about like, how does this affect society at large?
It's a big thing happening right now.
Yeah, which is why I've been like, I feel like on Instagram I've been acting like such an asshole recently because I had written for the past 5 years. I've been studying 2020, and I'm very shameless. I'm a fire sign as well, so I'm like, who cares? So yeah. I had written all of these predictions for 2020, and they're all horrifying. And at the time that I wrote them, people were like, "Ooh, Aliza, like, what negative shit are you saying?" And they're all coming into fruition. So I feel like my entire Instagram has just been like, and then I wrote this.
Told you.
Yeah, it's receipts. But I spent so many years interpreting and thinking and reflecting on how this weird moment was going to play out, and seeing it now unfold like in real time is a mind fuck. It's like it's an extraordinary mind fuck.
So was that just you having this thing about 2020, or has that been like kind of a known thing amongst your astrology world that 2020 is going to be like crazy?
Definitely a known thing. I mean, it's
really?
All astrologers. Yeah. I mean, in our like private conversations, it's something that we had been anticipating and trying to figure out how to prepare in terms of messaging for a long time. But some astrologers, with good reason, nobody wants to fearmonger. Nobody wants to like take advantage of people being in an unknown or insecure state and like exploit that or try to like monetize it somehow. So everybody has been in their own way, delicate in how they want to share information. I just saw a very obnoxious article in the New York Times that was basically, accusing some of my favorite astrologers along with Susan Miller about like, how come you didn't see this coming? And it's like, she did, first of all, everybody did. And that's also not what she wants to write about. She doesn't want to write about things that are going to scare her readers. She wants to write about things that are going to uplift them.
Yeah.
Me, with my freaky ass Capricorn rising Leo sun, like I'm not as sensitive about it. Like I'm just like want to get information out in different ways. But Susan, of course, knew what was happening. Everybody knew what was going to happen. We just don't always want to people out.
So were you scared of 2020? Like you were scared?
Yeah.
So like
I'm still scared.
Because you think it's going to get crazier?
Yeah.
Actually, I did just read or listen to something you wrote about how like, I think was it the last couple of days, saying that it was about to get really bad again, and that like to stop, like to keep social distancing and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, in January of this year, I went and had an in-person session with my teacher, Anne, and I had just heard about the coronavirus at that point, and I went to her and, we're in 2020 now, but we all know that 2020 is going to be a shitstorm. So I said to her, I was like, do you think that this virus is going to be what we were all predicting? And she was like, 100%, absolutely. She was like, it's going to be beyond what we could even imagine. And I was like, okay, noted, wash my hands, got it. And now that we have the attribution, now that we know sort of like the how this is all taking place, we can start looking at the planets and being like, yes, this is how it's going to move. This is how it's going to fluctuate.
So what's that? Is it going to get better at any point? Are we going to be okay next year? Like, what the fuck's
I
happening
think that,
here?
I mean, I haven't spent too much time looking at 2021 yet because 2020.
Actually, I read that too. But
Yeah.
you said like, I can't even, because 2020 is such a shit show. Essentially, I can't even move past this.
Yeah. I mean, I also, this is like just years of work has gone into me trying to understand this year.
So wait, when you knew 2020 was going to be crazy, right? Like, was that, well, I have a lot of questions, but you didn't know what it was going to be. So like, you didn't know if it would be a virus, if it would be like some crazy natural disaster, like you had no idea. You just knew 2020, some shit's going to go down, but I don't know what it's going to be.
Yes. I knew that there was going to be some sort of a catalyst, because ultimately this isn't really about the virus. This is about the infrastructure. This is, and what 2020 looks like.
Is that the government's infrastructure?
Yeah, it's about like the systems of the world. What 2020 looks like from an astrological perspective is a massive restructuring of power, and really like eye-opening information about the way that power is managed and controlled, who has the power, and redistributing that power. And this is not just something that begins and ends in 2020, but the profound impact of these planets that are all talking about issues relating to like power and systems are planets that haven't met up in thousands of years, like literally that haven't met up since the beginning of Babylon. So we don't have a precedent for what it looks like. There's certain things that we can peer into and say, well, last time Jupiter was in Capricorn was the 2008 recession, so that doesn't look great for finances. Last time Uranus was in Taurus was the Great Depression, so that doesn't look great for finances. But there's also things that just exist so much further outside of our scope of knowledge that what I kept saying before this year was like, we can't even predict what it's going to be because we don't have it doesn't, we haven't witnessed it before. It's something that has not happened in our lifetime yet. So it could have been, a horrible natural disaster and then a reaction to the natural disaster. It could have been, I honestly thought the election was a little too small of a concept because this is a global issue. So it could have been things relating to the fact that it's an election year, but I kept feeling like it had to be bigger than that. It looked like, I was thinking maybe it's going to be this thing that happened with Iran. That might have been at the beginning of the year, like maybe there was something there. But as soon as February rolled through and I started to see what was happening with,
well, you stopped at like I'd heard you saying maybe it was Iran at the beginning of the year, but then February rolled around and then I lost
February rolled around and it was so clear that this was going to be this virus.
So what does the rest of the year look like?
I think that there's going to be like 2 more really big waves of this. I think we're about to be on our second one. And then the third one, I think, is going to be in the fall. And it might actually be in early 2021. The third one is not. This second one is really going to be the scariest.
And that's globally or just in the US, or you don't really?
No, I'm looking at these planets from a US perspective. So even though this is something that is happening on a global level, my reading of it is going to be sort of US slanted because I'm here in the United States. I'm also very aware of how, the politics of the United States and how those are very deeply informing, what's happening on even a larger scale.
Definitely. I mean, that's I mean, if maybe we weren't in this situation, then it wouldn't have been so bad. And then, do you see it getting better? Like, do you sort of think, when you say looking at it macro scale, like, do you see what is kind of 2021 getting better? Are we going to come out better for this?
I mean, this is just going to be it's not an overnight process. We don't have, 2026 is also a really big year for the United States in particular.
Good or bad?
Like, important. Like, it's basically from the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Pluto, which is the planet that relates to transformation, has not been in the same position since then. And in 2026, it's going back to that same position because it takes 248 years to do an orbit. So we're starting to feel that now. But this is not, I would say that what is very comforting to me right now in a time when there is a lot of uncertainty, even astrologically that is the fact that everybody is here for a reason. Like, if you are alive right now in this insane fucking moment, like, you have a very special purpose. And there's no coincidences, there are no accidents. Like, anyone who is literally living out what will be in textbooks is in this moment for, that's like a very profound and magical thing. So I think everybody who's here is like well equipped for whatever we're going to face and whatever comes our way. But certainly it is not going to look like the same world that we were born into in the next 10 years.
Damn.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, that also, what a weird fucking thing for me to find myself as an astrologer in this moment, because again, like, I really did not, I thought I was just going to be an art dealer. I just wanted to go to Miami Basel. Like, that was it.
I feel that. The end all be all. If I can just get
the end all be all, we all just go to Miami.
Yeah. Like, for real though. Yeah. I mean, I believe as well that not to that, I've never thought about it on that level, but I'm definitely a firm believer in whatever happens is meant to happen and that you'll end up where you should and all of that. But in terms of that macro level that you just said, obviously I haven't thought about that, but I guess, that is, I mean, is it comforting? I don't know, but I know that I have a lot of people around me that make me feel good and safe. So I'm just gonna like try and cozy into that. But it's just crazy. All of it. It's so crazy. I mean, do you see us living in like bubble world?
No, I don't. I mean, I see us.
Is New York gonna be okay?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously a lot of people are not going to be okay because unfortunately we're talking about a virus that makes people sick and die. But like, with the exception of, God forbid, the illness component of this, yes, I think everyone is going to be broadly speaking, like, humanity is not going to cease to exist. Like, New York is not going to evaporate. Like,
okay,
these are the things that are important are still going to continue. But what does the government look like in 10 years from now? How do we, are our presidents still operating within 2 4-year structures, or is there no longer the same sort of like head of state symbol anymore? Has the United States broken up into smaller regions? Is it still one single entity? I think that those are really more of the questions that this moment is begging.
Interesting. You're like, the government history part is, you talk a lot about that. Is that just, have you been particularly interested in history before astrology, or did the astrology?
I was an art history major in college.
Okay.
I love history. I think astrology is history, because in order for us to understand how these planets move, whether that is on a big geopolitical level, or if that's in somebody's birth chart, you need to know what's happened before, so like if looking at your birth chart, if we were anticipating your Saturn return, which I'm sure is coming up very soon for you, we would say, okay, how have we seen Saturn in the past for you? What does Saturn represent for you? Does Saturn represent a particular male figure in your life? Does Saturn represent your relationship to work? Does it represent your relationship to your goals and ambitions? Like, when have we seen this come through? And what we would do is we would look into the past at your birth chart to sort of see, like, at different meaningful times in your life, what was Saturn doing? Where was it positioned? What was it connecting to? And from that information, we'd be like, okay, great. So if we know that Saturn is related to your family's concept of success, then probably what the Saturn return is going to be about for you is you defining your own version of success, because we already have established a correlation between Saturn and it doing a certain thing, and now it's showing up again. So like history and our personal history, our collective history, all of that is how predictions could even be made in the first place. There's actually this incredible article that I read many years ago, and it was talking about how people who have amnesia can't even do the most simple forward predicting exercise. Someone who has amnesia couldn't even tell you that the next day they were going to wake up and put on their shoes, because they have no frame of reference to the past. So without having a frame of reference to the past, you have no idea what is going to come into the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you ever drive your family crazy and being like, you guys can't, you have to stay in New York? No, you don't understand. Like, did you ever used to make them crazy, or your boyfriend be like, oh boy, here we go?
I actually said to my boyfriend the other day, because he said something where he was like, oh, didn't you call this? And I was like, I'm going to record you saying all of this shit. This is like the off the record shit that gets real. I don't think I drive them crazy. We would have to ask them, but I think that, I'm very grateful that I have a family that really like values my work and values the way that I interpret things and how I see things connecting. So maybe they're enablers, but so far it's been okay.
Where are you from?
I'm from New York.
Oh, you're from New York. Okay, so your whole family lives in New York.
Well, my dad actually lives in LA. My dad
okay.
his family lives in LA.
Okay, cool. So you're a New Yorker. Love a New Yorker. So you must be like hurting that your city's hurting right now.
Yeah, it sucks. It's like not how I want to see it. I mean, I appreciate the fact that people, like, I think New Yorkers are the fucking best. I was here on September 11th when I was 12 years old, and I'm here now. And anytime something really big happens, New Yorkers like really know how to take care of each other.
Yeah.
Like I'm really happy to see how many people are like, we clearly are all working together as a big community to try to make sure that we we can maintain our way of life after this. It's really very heartening to see.
Yeah, that's something I do miss about New York, is that part of, community and working together. There is definitely a lack of that in LA. I think people are so self-obsessed, or just like lacking empathy, or like, I don't understand, just this like self thinking, like the idea of not taking care of your neighbor. I heard you say something else that was essentially that, talking about, that you're a go-getter, but you also have, empathy, in that no matter what, you like, you care about others in terms of like taking care of other people, like you have a very strong sense of like taking care of others.
Yeah. I think
which I really related to, because I'm the same way. I'm very like, go and do what the fuck I want to do and whatever, but I will always have that level of like, how is this going to affect the next person? Always, like, no matter what.
So important. And I was especially became very attuned to it at the beginning of this outbreak, when there were all of those people who went to spring break.
Oh, the Florida kids.
Yeah, nothing's changed, because people like being disrespectful by not wearing masks and not wearing gloves and not protecting. It's not about you, it's about other people, the other people that you're exposing, you know. So nothing has changed in these weeks, but what I was thinking about at that time was the fact that we don't, you know, like with Trump as the president right now, who is the king of like, I got away with it, we are forgetting that the importance of consequences, you know, like actions have consequences.
That's it. That was your video. That was what it
Yeah.
was, right? Yeah.
You can't do things in a silo. The things that you do affect other people. And that's how it works. You know, if you live in any sort of community, unless you are totally fucking off the grid, which like, sure, one is welcome to do that. But if you're living in any sort of neighborhood, in any sort of community, like you are not just you can't just worry about yourself. You have to worry about other people too.
Yeah. I have that. I get so upset and frustrated. Like for a couple weeks there, every time I saw someone walk by our house without a mask on, I wanted to yell out the window, cover your fucking face. You know, I remember when this first happened and I was in New York. I left New York around March 16th, like right when it started happening.
Yeah, that's
right
early.
when shit got weird, you know, and I remember getting a mask, and it was around the time when they were saying, don't wear masks, you know, don't wear masks. And I was like, but what if I'm sick and I don't know it and I don't want to get someone else sick? Like, it's not even about me. And then of course, you know, it comes out saying you should be wearing them, but I don't, and the people around me, thank God, are also like that, sensitive to others. And it blows my mind. That people are so selfish. And I wonder if it's just choosing not to, like being like, I don't want to wear that mask, so I'm not going to do it, or thinking like it just doesn't matter, or not even thinking about it, you know. Like, I don't know what's worse, like being ignorant to it or choosing not to. Probably it's worse to choose not to.
Yeah, but I would say that they're all so folded into one another too. Like yes, I am such an advocate of empathy. My entire practice is fueled by empathy. I think that astrology is about learning how to empathize with yourself and then learning how to empathize with others and recognizing like my needs are my needs and they're totally 100% fine, but my best friend's needs are her best friend's needs and they're also 100% fine. And in order to be a good friend or partner or, you know, child or parent, like recognizing that you kind of have to work with other people to make sure that it's not just your needs being met, but that you're also supporting other people in their unique configurations. And then if we, you know, expand that out, it's like, yes, your safety, your individual safety is important, but that doesn't mean that the safety of other people isn't. Like, there's a way to take care of your individual safety and also be thoughtful about everyone else in your life too. And I think it really comes down to empathy. I think empathy should be taught in school, because clearly it's not a matter of, you know, it's not a question of like type of education. It's a question of like, do you know how to use that muscle? So I think it's public, private, you know, like it spans demographics. I think that empathy is just an incredible and critical thing to learn. We also like are in this crazy ass time where Trump legit says that showing emotion makes him feel like he looks weak. So there's,
I was gonna say, I mean, America shit is worse, you know. In like Italy, you have people taking care of their grandpapa and grandmama and like living in their homes, and they're more concerned with that kind of thing. Here it's like, do it yourself. I don't care about this person. I'm gonna do what I want to do when I want to do it, and you can't tell me what to do, you know. I mean, there's no sense of duty here.
It's crazy
at all. Yeah, I know.
And I think that this is like reality TV show capitalism, you know? Like,
yeah, I mean,
we've transcended it just being like, this is the political philosophy of capitalism. Like, this is not even real capitalism anymore. This is like Trump, the reality TV star, pretending capitalism, you know? But because there's no difference between reality and our subconscious, it's like, yeah, like this is what you get now. Like such a hyper lack of regard for other people that we are literally saying that it's okay for people to die. Like that's what's happening. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm like, I could so get into that with you. Like, and for real, like, this is the conversations I have at dinner all the time. But I know people be like, well, why don't you leave America? But yeah, I think empathy is also like the most important thing. Do you consider yourself an empath?
I do, but I'm like a recovering empath, I would say. I think that empathy and being an empath are totally different. Um, I think that being an empath is uh, usually happens as a reaction to pretty undesirable situations that one is in as a kid. It's usually like the result of being in, of like needing to feel what your parents are feeling or what your close people in your life are feeling in order for you to create a stronger bond. And that's the same reason that narcissists are narcissists. So I think that I am a recovering empath. I've tried to hone my personal empath abilities to turn them on and off a lot more, but I always have empathy.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm pretty sure I'm an empath. I gotta say, I'm so fucking sometimes it's actually in New York. As much as I love New York, sometimes I just feel like I'm like an open nerve walking around New York. I think I cry like 3 times a week just by being like overwhelmed with the feelings of things. I'm so painfully sensitive to things. I mean, it's hard, I gotta say, like, and I like that recovering empath because I would love to not cry every time I see someone like struggling, especially in New York. You're seeing it all the time, and like, sure, yeah, it's great to be able to like be helpful when you can and like have the empathy, but I think when it's causing your daily life to be a struggle, which sometimes it gets, like, for me, then it's really hard. I don't know, like, I really struggle with that. Like, I'm just so sensitive. It's
Yeah.
so hard.
Yeah, I there's this amazing technique and way of visualizing it, which I just talked about in my manuscript, which is like 4 people meet at the same restaurant, and the way that each person enters the restaurant, like one basically just goes to their seat, the other person like notices the maitre d is on that's like texting and is like, ooh, I like, what are they, do they usually not pay attention at work, and then gets their attention and goes to their seat, and then the third person like sees the maitre d on texting, notices that someone's yelling in the background, like feels like someone looking at them, and just becomes very viscerally aware of their environment, and then goes to their seat. And then the fourth person walks into the space, like feels like something horrible had happened there, sees that the rafters have like charred wood on them, and it's like, oh my god, there was a fire here, when did that happen, feels all of the pain of like the history of that environment, and then goes to their seat. And there's such a spectrum of like how much we feel and how much we're exposed to, and ultimately what we want to do is know how to move through different situations with the appropriate amount of uh, receptivity. Like one does not need to, when you're just going to meet your friends, unless you're going to meet your friends and you're going to have some really freaky conversations, like you don't need to absorb the history of a building before you have dinner with your friends most of the time.
Dude, I do that. I mean, I'm between 3 and 4, but I get this thing where sometimes if I go in a house or I walk past like some shit and I don't know, I just feel like some really fucked up energy or something bad happened there. Like it's like I've had that a few times where I've been in an area and been like, something really bad happened here. And it's never really good stuff. I've never like walk in somewhere and think, oh my God, there was an amazing birthday party here. Like, I walk in and I'm like, get overwhelmed and I'm like, this is bad, you know. And
Well, there's a reason for that too, and it's because our sensitivity is embedded into our survival skills.
Yeah.
So your sensitivity is going to sort of signal danger, even if that danger is long in the past, more viscerally than your sensitivity is going to signal like birthday party, like there was once a fabulous event that happened here.
Yeah, because I mean, I do also think, you know, that I would just call it like my spidey senses, and that one was raised in a way of being very like safety conscious, you know. My mom was always like you know, she also raised me just her alone, you know, and so she was always hypersensitive. I've definitely taken on some of her anxieties around that, which is its own thing, but also like just living in New York, I'm so sensitive to like weird shit that's happening and like constantly clocking everything, knowing like where a police station is, knowing like this, that, like when to use your key, when to walk past the front door, like not go in your apartment because what if, which I'm grateful that I have that because I think it's kept me out of a lot of danger, or helped me avoid it. You know, like I don't know how I've been in some pretty crazy situations and managed to get out of there and like I'm okay. You know, when I think about like being crazy and like partying in the East Village and like all of that shit, and I'm like, however, I made it back home alone, like safe, like there's obviously some shit that's going on there, but and I'm grateful for that part, but for sure it does get sometimes overwhelming. But
Yeah, and I'm sure that you and your mom being in this symbiotic, you know, like you need to take care of each other is part of the reason that you developed such high levels of sensitivity, because maybe your mom was watching, you know, the immediate danger in front of you, but you then felt responsible for watching all of like the potential dangers that could happen, and like you would oscillate as to like who is, you know, in a nonverbal way, who was keeping tabs on what. And that is how people become an empath. That is exactly how somebody opens up that much receptivity. But because it is so linked to survival skills, it is often overwhelming and it is often not pleasant. So I think that that's part of the reason that I feel like saying I'm a recovering empath is really important, is because there is a distinction between choosing to be an empathetic person and then also not choosing to just be taking in so much energy and to not even know what the fuck to do with it, you know?
so how do you not take in all that energy?
I mean, I really practice being aware of how I'm affected by things. And through being consciously aware of it, it